So I've done a lot of videos on modern cars. I mean, it's kind of what you would expect from a channel called themotoringchronicle.com, but I haven't gone too in depth about why cars are getting bigger. I've kind of mentioned a few reasons behind it, but I've not really gone into in depth as to why. What are the specific reasons? Why, in particular, are modern cars getting larger? Because without a doubt, modern cars are getting bigger. You look at cars compared to their counterparts in the 1980s and the 1990s, and most cars are significantly larger. And that size difference is mainly coming from the width and also the length of the cars. The overall height of cars hasn't really changed that much. And I've done a full in-depth video going over how much bigger cars are specifically on the channel already. If you haven't checked that out, please do, of course. But this video is going to focus on why. Why are cars getting bigger? Well, there's a number of reasons behind this. Now, the first one, and one that I've mentioned many times but not gone too in depth as to why exactly this is a reason, it's the safety. Safety in modern cars is better than it ever has been. If you're in a modern car and you have a car accident, your rate of surviving without any kind of injury is far higher than even a few decades ago. The safety equipment in cars is getting a lot better. And thinking cynically as well, obviously, the people who make these cars want to ensure that their car gets the highest safety rating possible. And that applies not only to the passengers in the car, but also any potential pedestrians or potential other cars that you may hit. Again, I've already done a video going over this where I've mentioned how these rankings are basically made and also the safest car on the market right now. So do check that out if you haven't already. But basically, it's to do with the safety of the people in the car and also outside of the car. And to ensure this, there are a lot more airbags in the car and there are a lot more crumple zones. Now, crumple zones is something I've not really spoken about in this channel. Everybody knows what airbags are. Airbags are the things that deploy that basically try and cushion the blow of any kind of impact from when you're moving and the car isn't. Because in a car accident, obviously the car will stop moving eventually, but you, the momentum of you, the inertia of you, has to be displaced. And to do that in a more careful manner, something like a airbag really helps with that. It's not only for your face, it's not only for the dash, but it's also for side impacts as well. I know very well, having a really bad side impact in my car very, very long time ago when I was a kid. Airbags saved my life when I was a kid. I might have lost my arm or something otherwise if it wasn't for that. Yeah, seriously, how bad it was. But that's ancient history. But what about the future? What about the present right now when it comes to cars with this? Well, crumple zones are a key part of this. So, and I'm going to use a bit of a motorsport analogy here, but people who watch Formula One, people who watch high-end racing series, you might see accidents where the cars effectively disintegrate. And they look really, really violent. And in truth, they are violent accidents, but they're not quite as bad as what you would think they are. They look a lot more dramatic because all the parts are falling off the car. The reason why this happens is deliberate. It's all to do with the displacement of momentum. And now I'm doing this from an engineering point of view, so I apologize if this is a bit too much for you guys, but I will try to explain this as best I can in the simplest possible way. Basically, when a car is moving, there is a certain amount of momentum. Momentum is just the overall speed of what something is going at times by the mass. Now, when in the event of an impact, you want to displace this momentum as much as possible. You can slow the car down, you can do that, but obviously if the car, the guy is, the person that's driving the car is unable to control the car, if it's on ice, if it's, in the air, for example, something like that, and you can't really control the speed of the car, what you can do is displace the mass of it. All the parts falling off the car like that, again, it looks dramatic, but the impact of that is that the actual forces upon the people inside the car in the event of a crash are reduced. Crumple zones work in a similar way. They deform, the car deforms, so that we, the passengers, the driver, everybody in the car, that we don't deform. All that momentum is displaced by the car. It's quite often that people will complain about, oh, it wasn't even that much of an impact and my car's in all these pieces and I've got to pay a lot to get it repaired, which of course is not ideal. However, What would you rather have? A smashed up car or a broken leg? I know which one I'd choose personally. So that's a big reason for it. And that on those crumple zones and airbags and everything, well, maybe not the airbags. We don't see airbags deploying externally on cars, although it has been talked about. It is talked about being potentially something that's going to happen in the future. But all these crumple zones and everything, they also apply to pedestrians on the outside as well. And again, to have crumple zones, you need space. You effectively need just a bit of hollow air in between the outside of the car and the inside, and that's what that's for. So the cars, even though they are bigger, some of the spaces aren't really fully filled. It is just to make it safer for anybody in the event of an accident. There is a simple reason as well on top of that about why these cars are bigger. Is because they sell. They sell, and this is something I've hinted at when it comes to technology, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But overall, there is a general perception, I would say personally, that bigger cars are worth more money. You're getting more bang for your buck. You're getting more per car per £1,000 or whatever that you pay for a car. If you've got a big car, people will be like, oh, that's it's a big car. It's impressive. That's the thing. Whereas a little car, even if it's a good car, it's not very impressive, is it? And that's a big part of it. A lot of they're not stupid car companies. Like when you think of a luxury car, what do you think of? You think of a Jaguar, an Aston Martin, BMW, Mercedes. What do they all have in common? They're big. They're big cars. Yes, they are good cars as well. But if an Aston Martin was smaller, would it be perceived to be as luxurious, as good? No, I don't think it would be. Whether it's right or wrong, that is a general kind of perception that a lot of people have, particularly if you're a more casual buyer and you're just looking for a car that'll be good. Salespeople, when it comes to this, they will just give you the biggest car possible because it's like, well, this is what you want, isn't it? This is what you really want, and that kind of feeds through into that. So there is a general perception of bigger is better when it comes to cars. And also, leading into that is the technology. And I've spoken extensively about technology in cars for a long time now. Obviously, cars nowadays there's so much tech in them. It's incredible, really. Again, the accident prevention things that a lot of cars have nowadays, that feeds into the safety, that takes up space. But you've also got things like the sat nav. You've got things like the telemetry. You've got things like TV screens in the back of some of the car seats at the front so that people in the back can go and view something. You've got heated seats, heated steering wheels. I'm pretty sure there's even heated gear levers these days. You've got Teslas and other electric cars that have massive screens in the middle of them. They've got like a tablet. That all has to go somewhere. And yes, car companies could make these devices smaller. They could make them more compact, but again, it feeds into the bigger is better narrative here. And on top of that as well, because of the space that it's taking up, if you want to reduce how much space that technology is taking up, I'm afraid you're going to have to make it more expensive, and the customer is going to have to pay more. Does the customer want to pay more? No. Will they pay more? Maybe. But our competition, they're not charging more, so why should we? Why should we deliberately make our car smaller to make it more expensive and therefore less attractive to the customer? It all makes sense when you think about it like this. And as annoying as it is in this country, because our country's roads really do struggle at times when it comes to these big cars, and I've done a lot of videos on that too, and I've found that actually narrower roads are safer. But the fact remains that a lot of these cars are a bit too big for them. And I would say, on the balance of things, I've changed my opinion doing these videos. I'd say that's the fault of the car companies. But whenever they can do it, they will. People in the comments section often talk about putting extreme taxes on these cars and stuff like that, and possibly, yeah, I mean, if you do it for the emissions thing, then maybe that would be a way to do it. Apparently the Netherlands and some countries like that have a similar thing, and that means that there's less big 4x4s and SUVs in those countries as a direct result of that. I haven't really done much research on that, but I can believe it. To be honest, I can absolutely believe it from this comment section of what people are saying. But at the end of the day, bigger cars are just going to keep getting bigger for the meantime, and I've kind of already said that as well. There's no evidence for me that shows a real slowdown. I did see a graph that went over the cubic volume of cars over the years, and it seems like it's stagnating recently. But I respectfully don't see that in the real world. Sometimes data is not always 100% accurate, but I would say that the biggest cars now are getting bigger. There are cars genuinely out there now And I've been in some of them. My dad's Hyundai, electric Hyundai car, I think it's an Ioniq or something, or whatever it's called. That is too big to fit in a lot of car spots in the UK, which is just unthinkable, really. You look at how my family's first family car was a Renault Clio, and that was considered a family car. You look at that thing now, but if you look at a 1990s Renault Clio, which you don't really see, they were not the most reliable cars, let's be honest, but you don't really see them nowadays, but if you were to see one, it would be tiny. I will mention one thing, though. I will mention one thing, and this has been mentioned in a few comment sections too, saying that, oh, well, the narrative that cars were smaller in the 60s isn't true. There were huge cars in the 1960s, and yes, of course, there were huge cars in the 1960s. The Ford Zephyr is a very obvious example of this, but those cars were not very common, I don't think. Ronnie Cray or Reggie Cray, he had a Ford Zephyr. It was a gangster. I don't think that was the everyday family car. I could be wrong, but I speak to my older family, from older generations, and they talk about things like Ford Cortinas and stuff like that. It doesn't really seem the biggest car, I'll be honest, especially nowadays. So cars in general were smaller in the 60s. There were some outliers, obviously. American cars in particular, again, like that Ford Zephyr, were big cars, and you can still see them. You can still see them roaming around, even in the UK every now and again. They're beautiful things, but they're massive as well. I would say that British cars, European cars in particular, have really increased in size in recent times. American cars are different. America's just different in general. Let's be real here, guys. They're the real outlier when it comes to this. Their cars have always been massive. Theirs were huge in the 50s and 60s, and I think they got a little smaller over time. So you got to like the 80s. Now they're getting bigger again. So yeah, it's just an interesting discussion point. There's a few reasons for it at the end of the day. Why are cars getting bigger? Technology, safety, and more importantly for the car companies, the market value. Bigger cars are perceived to be more valuable, so they can be perceived to have higher prices. If they have higher prices, they'll sell them for more. Simple as that. It's not rocket science. It is simple marketing techniques, in my opinion. That's what's going on here. But, well, why do you think cars are getting bigger these days, guys? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Is there anything you can add to this discussion? I've already covered plenty in this video already. But yeah, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you have a suggestion for a topic to cover here on the motoringchronicle.com, all ears, all up for anything. You let me know what you want to see next, guys. And yeah, we'll see you very soon for some more motoring content here on the motoringchronicle.com. Like, share, comment, subscribe, ring the bell as well, and we'll see you soon, guys. Have a good one.